I was actually at a coffee shop the other day, eavesdropping, as you do,
Oh, of course.
naturally. And I heard someone at the next table say, my shrink is going to love this.
Just casually dropping it into conversation.
Right. It rolled right off their tongue. And it got me thinking about how that word is just, it's just part of the furniture of the American English language now.
It really is. I mean, it's right up there with calling a police officer a cop or, a physician a doc. It's just the default slang for anyone working in mental health.
But unlike doc, which is, it's just a logical abbreviation, shrink is strange when you actually stop to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a verb acting as a noun. And it implies making something smaller, reduction, diminishing.
Which,
if you think about the actual goal of therapy growth, expansion, understanding it seems almost contradictory.
It does. And that's because the origin of the word has absolutely nothing to do with healing, at least not in the modern sense. It is not a cute nickname.
No, it is definitely not. And that's exactly why we pulled this specific stack of research for you today. Because when you trace the etymology of shrink, you don't end up in a medical library.
No, you do not.
You end up in a very specific, honestly, very gruesome chapter of anthropology. And then you take this sharp turn into the power dynamics of 1950s Hollywood.
It is a wild trajectory. We're going to go from severed heads in the Amazon rainforest straight to the backlots of MGM studios.
And it matters that we understand this, right? Because I was looking at the National Institute of Mental Health data. They released a report in 2022.
Oh, right, the usage stats.
Yeah, showing that roughly 30 million U.S. adults received psychological treatment that year. 30 million.
That is a massive chunk of the population.
It's huge. And I'd bet the vast majority of those people use the word shrink without knowing they are literally referencing a war trophy.
Or, honestly, without knowing who they're actually talking about.
Exactly.
Because one of the things we really need to fix today for you listening is the confusion between the professionals.
Right, because shrink is this giant bucket term.
It's a catch-all, but the difference between the person prescribing your medications and the person listening to your problems it's huge.
It's the difference between chemistry and conversation. So we will definitely break that down.
But first, we have to solve the mystery.
Yes, we have to play detective. So let's look at the written record. When is the first time shrink actually shows up as a noun for a doctor?
Well, if we're looking for the modern shortened slang, just shrink. The Oxford English Dictionary points us to 1966.
Okay, the swinging 60s.
Specifically the counterculture, yeah. It appears in Thomas Pynchon's novel, The Crying of Lot 49.
Such a weird book.
It really is. And he introduces a character named Dr. Hilarious.
Which is just a fantastic name for a satirical character.
Oh, it's perfect. But the narration specifically refers to him as, quote, her shrink or psychotherapist.
And what's really interesting about that quote is that Pynchon doesn't stop to explain it to the reader.
No, he doesn't.
He assumes you just get it.
Which tells us the word was already circulating in the culture by then. Pynchon was just capturing the vibe of the street, or at least the vibe of the, the cool literary crowd.
But he didn't invent it.
No. To find the actual patient zero of this slang, we have to go back to the longer form of the word.
Head shrinker.
Right. Head shrinker. And for that, we have to look at a copy of Time magazine from November 1950.
Which is such a weird place to find the origin of a medical term. I mean, it was an article about William Boyd, right?
Yeah, the actor, the guy who played the cowboy hero Hopalong Cassidy.
Right.
He was the absolute idol of millions of American kids at the time. And this article was a profile on his career. It noted that he had a bit of a wild youth before becoming this clean-cut hero.
Right, he liked to party.
Exactly. So the writer noted that anyone predicting his success back then would have been, quote, led instantly off to a head shrinker.
But here is the smoking gun of this whole investigation. In 1950, the editors of Time, who were writing for a massive mainstream American audience, they didn't think people would know what that meant.
That is the key detail. There was a footnote.
Right. An asterisk at the bottom of the page that literally defined head shrinker as, quote, Hollywood jargon for a psychiatrist.
Hollywood jargon?
So in 1950, this wasn't a word you'd hear in an auto factory Detroit or a farm in Kansas. This was insider baseball.
It was highly localized slang developed by the people making movies.
Which raises the obvious question. Why did the film industry, of all places, decide to call their doctors head shrinkers?
Well, to answer that, we have to leave Los Angeles.
And go deep into the Amazon. And a quick warning for you listening. This is where the research gets pretty vivid.
You're referring to the work of Roger Peace.
Yes, the Merriam-Webster editor.
Right. In 1989, he connected this Hollywood slang directly to the specific rituals of the Jivaroan peoples in Ecuador and Peru.
Because they were famous for creating something called sansa.
Sansa, shrunken heads.
Now, I think most of us have this sort of cartoonish idea of what a shrunken head is. Like maybe we saw it in an old adventure movie or a bizarre museum display.
Just a dried out skull.
Right. But the actual process described in the anthropological accounts it's incredibly technical and really graphic.
It's not just drying out a head. The process Pease describes involves taking the decapitated head of an enemy and surgically removing the bone.
Wait, they take the skull out?
The skull, the jawbone, all the muscle, the fat, and the brain. All of it gets removed.
You're essentially boning the head like a fish.
In a way, yes. You are left with just the skin and the hair.
Wow.
And then they would place the skin into a boiling pot containing water and very specific tannins.
And the heat and the chemicals cause the collagen fibers in the skin to contract.
Right. It shrinks. Literally.
It shrinks down to the size of a fist.
But the features remain recognizable. That was actually the whole point. It had to look like the person it came from.
But here is where the metaphor starts to take shape for our deep dive today. Because the Jivaroan tribes didn't do this just because they wanted a grisly necklace.
No.
I mean, maybe there was a status element to it, but the primary purpose was deeply spiritual, wasn't it?
That's the crucial link. The underlying belief was that the enemy possessed a musak.
An avenging spirit.
Exactly. If you killed a man in battle, his spirit would seek revenge on you. It would haunt you or curse you, unless you trapped it.
So the physical shrinking process was actually a spiritual containment strategy.
Precisely. By shrinking the head and sewing the lips shut, which was the final step of the ritual, you were neutralizing the chaotic, dangerous power of that spirit.
You were rendering it small and harmless so it couldn't hurt you.
Right.
Okay, so I want you to hold that image in your mind. You have a ritual designed to take a dangerous, powerful, chaotic force and shrink it down to size to control it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, transport that exact idea to 1950s Hollywood.
The golden age of the studio system.
Right, and the studio system wasn't just about making movies. It was about owning people. Actors were under strict contracts.
They were assets.
Yes, and they were often very volatile assets.
High pressure, rampant substance abuse, massive public scrutiny. The stars were often incredibly unstable.
So enter the psychiatrist. If you are a powerful studio executive and you're a multi-million-dollar star is having a total meltdown on set, who do you call?
You call the head shrinker.
Right, and this is where the metaphor gets really interesting because the research shows there are two ways to read this, and they both say a lot about power.
The first reading is all about the ego.
Which is the most common theory, right?
Yeah. The idea is that the movie star has a quote-unquote big head, a massive inflated ego that is making them impossible to work with. So the psychiatrist's job is to shrink that head, to deflate the ego.
It's so cynical. It implies the doctor isn't there to heal the patient's trauma or help them. He's just there to pop the balloon so the actor can get back on set and make the studio money.
Exactly. It treats the personality as a defect that needs to be reduced.
But there is a second theory in the sources that aligns even more closely with that Amazonian ritual.
The idea of shrinking the problem.
Explain that one.
Well, imagine a patient, an actor, or honestly anyone else coming in with anxieties that feel totally overwhelming. The problems feel giant, monstrous, completely unmanageable.
Right.
The therapist helps shrink those problems down. They contain them.
So just like the Sansa traps the avenging spirit so it can't hurt the warrior, the therapist traps the trauma so it can't hurt the patient.
Yeah, it's a much more charitable interpretation of the slang.
It is.
But given that this started as Hollywood jargon, which is notoriously biting and sarcastic, I definitely lean toward the control aspect.
Yeah.
The studio bosses likely saw psychiatrists as fixers, mechanics for the mind.
It's fascinating how the term stuck, though. I mean, it started as this very specific, slightly mocking insider term, but by the time we hit the 1970s, it had completely escaped the studio lots.
It went mainstream. But we do have to remember the context of the 70s. Mental health care was still heavily, heavily stigmatized.
Right. It wasn't something you bragged about on Instagram like people do today.
Yeah. Far from it. If you called someone a head shrinker in 1975 or said your neighbor was seeing a shrink, it was often a way of marking them.
It suggested they were broken. Or weak, or crazy.
It was a way of othering them, like, oh, he's with his shrink.
Exactly. It maintained a safe distance. But language evolves, as it always does. And today, the connotation has shifted again.
It has.
I feel like it's almost affectionate now.
Yeah.
Or at least utilitarian.
There's a really great piece by Dr. Ronald Riggio. He wrote it for Psychology Today back in 2012, and he compared it to calling a lawyer a shark.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
Right, because calling someone a shark isn't nice, technically. It implies they are a ruthless predator. But if you are in a high-stakes lawsuit,
You want a shark.
you absolutely want a shark. It acknowledges potency. It acknowledges that they do something intense and effective. Riggio argues that shrink has moved into that territory.
Like it acknowledges that the professional is doing deep, sometimes scary work.
Exactly. But Riggio also points out that while patients might use it comfortably, the professionals themselves, they don't really love it.
Many of them hate it.
Yeah.
Is it just the historical baggage? Or is it simply inaccurate?
It's the inaccuracy. And this is where we really need to serve you, the listener, especially if you might be navigating the mental health system right now. Because shrink is a really lazy word.
It blurs the lines between very different jobs.
It does.
I think this is a huge point of confusion for a lot of people.
Mm.
We use psychiatrist and psychologist interchangeably in casual conversation all the time. But if I'm actually looking for help, they're not the same door.
They are completely different doors. Let's actually break it down using the table from the source material, like a user guide. If you are standing in the hallway of mental health, which door do you open?
Okay, let's start with the psychiatrist.
Okay, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor. They have an MD or a DO after their name. They went to medical school. They did a residency in a hospital.
So they approach the mind through the body.
Precisely. Their primary toolkit is biology and chemistry. While they are trained in therapy, the modern healthcare model usually positions them as the experts in medication.
So if I go to a psychiatrist, what does that appointment actually look like?
It often looks like a standard doctor's visit. It might be 15 or 20 minutes. They are checking your symptoms, adjusting your dosage, monitoring side effects.
Okay.
If you are looking for someone to spend an hour diving into your childhood memories, a psychiatrist is usually not the person you're seeing for that, largely due to how insurance and billing work.
Okay, so psychiatrist equals meds, chemistry. Now what about the psychologist?
A psychologist is a doctor, but they are not a medical doctor. They usually hold a PhD or a PsyD. Their training is in human behavior, cognitive processing, and therapeutic techniques.
Can they prescribe drugs?
In the vast majority of states, no. Their primary tool is talk.
So this is the classic couch experience.
This is the 50-minute hour. This is where you do the deep processing, the behavioral changes, the cognitive reframing. If you need to talk it out, you want a psychologist.
But then there is a third group. And honestly, I think this is where the term shrink gets the most misuse. The social workers.
Yes. This is a huge misconception. When people hear social workers, they often think of Child Protective Services or government caseworkers.
Right.
And while that is a vital part of the field, a licensed clinical social worker, an LCSW, is actually one of the most common providers of mental health therapy in the country. They are often grouped under the term psychotherapist.
So how does their approach differ from a psychologist? If they both do talk therapy, what's the actual distinction?
It's often a matter of lens. A psychologist is trained to look primarily inward at your cognitive structures, your internal logic.
Okay.
A social worker is trained to look at the person in the environment.
Give me an example of how that plays out.
Okay, let's say you are suffering from severe anxiety. A psychologist might focus on your thought patterns, how you are catastrophizing, how to interrupt that mental loop.
Mm-hmm.
A social worker will do that too, but they are also trained to actively ask, is your housing stable?
Mm-hmm.
How is your work environment? What systemic pressures are acting on you?
Oh, that was a really helpful distinction. So the psychologist looks at the engine, the social worker looks at the road you're driving on.
That's a perfect analogy. And then you have even more subsets, like industrial organizational psychologists who work with corporations to optimize workflow and employee well-being.
And if you call an IO psychologist a shrink, they're going to look at you like you have three heads.
Right. Because they aren't treating individual patients in a clinic. They are treating companies. They aren't shrinking anything. They're usually trying to grow profits or efficiency.
Wow.
So the slang just totally falls apart there.
It really highlights how much heavy lifting that one little word shrink is doing. We use it to cover everything from brain chemistry to corporate consulting.
And yet, despite its inaccuracy, it survives. And I think that speaks to something deeper about how we view mental health now.
How so?
Well, go back to the Amazon, the Sansa. That ritual was about fear. You shrank the head because you were terrified of the spirit.
Right.
And in 1950s Hollywood, it was about control. You shrank the head because the ego was a threat to the production schedule.
Fear and control.
But today, When someone says, I'm going to see my shrink, they usually mean I'm going to take care of myself. We have essentially reclaimed the word. We took a term that was about silencing an enemy and turned it into a term about listening to ourselves.
That is the ultimate irony, isn't it? Shrink implies reduction. But the goal of modern therapy is usually expansion, expanding your capacity to handle stress, expanding your self-awareness.
We've inverted the meaning while keeping the word. It's just a linguistic trophy we decided to keep on the shelf.
So for you listening, if you're trying to navigate all this,
Yeah.
if you find yourself using the word shrink, just know that you are referencing a wild lineage that includes tribal warriors, Thomas Pynchon, and William Boyd.
But practically speaking, ignore the slang when you're actually looking for help.
Yes.
Ask the specific questions. Do I need biology? Call the MD. Do I need processing? Call the PhD. Do I need systems support? Call the LCSW.
Don't let a 1950s nickname dictate your 2026 healthcare.
Amen to that.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We talked about how head shrinker was born from the specific anxieties of the 1950s. It was the era of the big ego, the swollen head.
The great man theory of history and the massive celebrity culture that came with it.
Exactly. The problem back then was that people were too big for their britches. But I'd argue we are living in a completely different psychological era right now.
Oh, entirely.
We aren't in the age of the big ego anymore. We are in the age of the fractured self.
We are fragmented.
We're split between our online avatars and our real selves. We are doom scrolling constantly. Our attention is shattered into 10-second clips. Our heads aren't swollen, they're scattered.
And that requires a totally different kind of medicine.
Exactly. So if shrink was the slang for the doctor who fixed the swollen heads of the past, what slang is going to emerge for the doctors of the future? What do you call the person who takes all the fragmented pieces of a digital brain and puts them back together?
The gluer. Or maybe the integrator.
Maybe the rebooter.
Oh, I like the rebooter.
Who knows? But language always catches up to reality eventually. I have a feeling we aren't done inventing words for the people who help us keep it together.
I think you're absolutely right.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.